Dr. Judy Mik earned a BA in chemistry from the University of Virginia in 1980 and a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology from George Washington University in 1992. In her 35-year career, she has done pioneering work in immunology, epigenetics, virology, and natural products drug development, including discovery of the modulation of DNA methylation machinery by human retroviral infection and the concept of inflammatory cytokines and chemokine signatures of infection and disease. In 2014, she and Kent Heckenlively, did I say his name right? Heckenlively co-authored the book Plague. Thank you, Judy, for joining us.
It's always good to be here, Nancy. I appreciate it.
Go ahead.
Today's the third in a series of webinars we've done, and the focus today is on the gut health, gut microbiome, and how it develops and its importance in health and disease, and how we prevent injury and how we fix injury, hopefully.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if you can get started with your presentation,
Sure.
That would be great.
Will do. So I should be screen sharing it now. So let's do that. And so just tell me if you can't see it.
I can see it.
Great. So what I show here on the first slide to introduce the connection between the immune system and the brain is a book by Jacqueline Schwartz and Stacy Bilbo. They're University of Duke University investigators. And this is just a compendium that was put together in about 2015 of all that's known and new in the immune system and the developing brain. And key to that, which we've only recently appreciated, is that immunity isn't static. It develops throughout life. It changes with age, and those unique features are extremely important with regard to on the next slide, the gut microbiome. Not only the gut microbiome, we're going to be talking about microbiomes and in just the gut today because we're just thinking about gut health. Well, your microbiome, simply stated, is just the good bacteria that are in your gut that do essentially everything. They're a signaling and metabolism network for producing metabolites for you to develop a strong immune system, to talk to your brain, and that's what we'll talk about throughout today. So this first slide shows that a very important thing to recognize in preventing injury and starting out all of life with healthy gastrointestinal tract and a healthy gut is that the microbiome develops after you're born. So, and it's not really fully developed where you see there in blue the facultative bacteria and the anaerobic, the bacteria that work without air, and the others that work with air and other microbes in order to produce certain metabolites, which are key for your nutrition, for your immune health, for your cells to communicate and prevent pathogens from colonizing your gut. So it's really important to notice that since it's not fully developed until you're a year old, anything you do to that infant, besides providing mother's milk or formulas, give you the chance to disrupt the normal development. You don't want to use antibiotics, as we talked about in another webinar. And importantly, this is one of my central themes to why you don't vaccinate a newborn, to why you don't vaccinate or use antibiotics in anyone, prenatal, not in mom, no flu shots for mom, no shots of any kind for mom, because what that does is disrupt before they're born the ability to develop a healthy gastrointestinal tract. The next slide shows you, this is all that we've learned, a depiction from, I'll give the references to all of these, Nancy, after the talk, how important all of the various areas and different cell type and development of those cells, from prenatal intestine all the way through the neonatal intestine. I'm walking across the bottom of that slide to the adult intestine. There are different regions, different lymphoid cells, different immune cells, different communication happening all the way up and down the gut or the intestine, all the way from the top of your neck to your anus is a different microbiome. And when you break down a given area with a toxin such as an antibiotic, which takes out good bacteria as well as bad bacteria, or with a vaccine, which injects toxins, other formaldehyde toxins, polysorbate 80, which is in there simply to destroy the tight junctions and allow things to get into and pass the gut in the intestine. And this doesn't allow you to develop tolerance and appropriate immune stimulation, so you don't develop immunity in a proper way and can no longer distinguish good bacteria from bad bacteria. So a lot of the gut autoimmune diseases, like inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, and others, are actually initiated early in life and when that microbiome is being formed because it's dysregulated. So on the next slide, I talk about...
Judy, can I ask you a question real quick? Sure. It's my understanding that going back to the birth process, that a vaginal birth is actually what initiates the development of the microbiome. And yeah. There's a difference between, my daughter happened to have been born via C-section. After 20 hours of hard labor, she never descended. And, you know, she definitely has gut issues, which I wonder if it's not in part to her not having a vaginal birth.
Yes, in part, we've learned that over the years, that vaginal birth is the way that going through the birth canal, you actually is your first interaction with the various microbiomes of your mother. And yes, absolutely, you get the gut microbiome from a vaginal delivery. And that said, then you go further to protect and ensure a normal development as mom is breastfeeding, having lots of fermented foods, lots of healthy bacteria, and mom herself doesn't allow things like antibiotics while she's breastfeeding or vaccination while she's breastfeeding, because again, all of that goes directly to the child and to the infant and can different ways destroy the healthy microbiome. But yes, it's not the only thing, but it is an important component to that. And I guess with all of the disease that we're seeing in the 21st century, it was that convenience of, oh, let's all have a C-section. Of course, that's not what happened with your daughter, but we started having C-sections, and that's when we started to see all of the kids with not only the gut issues, but also things like asthma, because the lung microbiome, which I won't talk about today, is the same thing. It's a different microbiome, different bacteria, but that's where antigens in that last slide, I'll go back there, in the neonatal intestine, in the neonatal lung, this is where you're being exposed to the various bacteria, the good and the bad, and you make these lymphoid cells that have to understand who's commensal, and they have to stay on the right side of the fence. So we'll talk a lot about that in the next few slides, because that's what I'm showing you in this next slide. The gut can be considered the second brain because 70% of the immune system is in the gut. So they said all along the bottom, you see all of the adrenergic nerves and all of the afferent nerves and everything that which goes, you know, all the way through the gut and innervates and produces things like GABA and serotonin and 5-HT, fatty acids, really important because fatty acids are the signaling molecules in the brain. And so we'll talk a lot about the brain and its development, and along with the gut's development. So that was why I had that first slide saying they're inextricably linked, and they don't just, the minute you're born, everything's fixed in life. So everything you do throughout life, and I know, Nancy, that your expertise is stress and emotions, imparting various bad metabolism, and it talks to the gut in such a way. We used to think, before we understood the relationship of a bacteria called Heliobacter pylori, we used to think that ulcers, stomach ulcers, ran through families because you were high strung or emotional. And yes, we found out later that the stress contributes to it, in that it will activate these pathogens to start, or these what should be commensal bacteria. The inflammation will come into the gut, give you a leaky gut, which I believe I talk about in future slides. And then everything signals back to the brain, as you see there, and begins to control the vagus nerve, where infection of vagus nerve stimulates all of the pain syndromes we think about, fibromyalgia, every kind of cognitive disease, myalgic encephalomyelitis. Those are all diseases which have a huge basis in the gut. Autism spectrum disorders, that's where I first showed this slide a few years ago. Well, why? I say here microbial burden is a key issue in chronic disease because there are literally trillions of microbes in the gut. We recently learned that it wasn't 10 times more microbes than cells in the body, but it's about 3 times more. So really, we think of this as another immune system. It's another gate there. If you see the various bacteria, you want to keep things on the right side of the gut epithelia and these tight junctions. So the gut microbiota, shown in the right-hand side part of the slide, are signaling the immune cells. They're signaling adipose fat tissue. They're signaling the hypothalamus to control food intake and insulin sensitivity. So these, if they cannot signal the microbiota on what is necessary food, and if it's too inflamed, then everything gets on the wrong side of that intestinal lumen, and you begin to you will get sick, because good bacteria in the wrong place are by definition bad. And it imparts this conversation between the gut microbiome and the immune system and the brain. Impacts every organ system, from the liver's ability to detox to the muscle's ability to work, so that oxidative stress doesn't cripple the muscle and the mitochondria in all of those organ systems. So the microbes have a vast number of genes, and it's very important in the compounds they make that are signaling molecules to not only our gut and our brain, but every part. So the next slide I'm showing you says that in a little bit different way, drilled down. Commensal bacteria exert these protective, structural, and metabolic effects. So when we say leaky gut, yes, the tight junctions are broken down, the structural functions. You need a barrier fortification. You need the induction of IgA. The immunoglobulin A is the gut immunoglobulin, important for mediating immune responses and in your front line. Well, IgA is going to be disrupted if you make those tight junctions leaky and you have the wrong commensal bacteria, you have the wrong bacteria in there, because if the good guys aren't filling these structural spaces, then the bad guys will. So we know when we have things like SIBO and all of these leaky gut diseases, overgrowth of yeast, that's because the communication has been disrupted, and then you'll have pathogen displacement shown in the left-hand corner there that I'm pointing to. You'll have nutrient competition, receptor competition. We'll talk a little bit later about the endocannabinoid system and how important that is, the endogenous cannabinoid system in immunity and in these communications. So all of the good protective function is making antimicrobial factors, being able to utilize nutrients appropriately. We see a lot of this extreme overweight, not because the nutrients you're not getting the nutrients in some cases, but simply because you can't metabolize them appropriately because you don't have the appropriate good bacteria, and thus they're not digested and delivered to the signaling molecules where they need to be. So the metabolic function are control of the epithelial cell differentiation, your ability to metabolize dietary carcinogens, the synthesis of vitamins like vitamin D and other things that aren't synthesized until they see the appropriate signals in the gut. And key to everything that we think about are compounds such as butyrate, and butyrate is a methylation modulating compound, and these bacteria make butyrate. So you're literally telling gene expression when to go off and on by appropriate DNA methylation by a bacterial produced metabolite. So we know when we have genetics of things like MTHFR, which we discussed in an earlier seminar, where you can't properly methylate as rapidly, then you're going to be more susceptible to a lot of the viral pathogens and the retrovirus expression and the inappropriate expression of your endogenous viruses, along with, all of those vaccines. And we talked at great length about the retroviruses which are there, and some of the damage they do is to the methylation machinery. But it's very key to know the first place they go. This was the whole concept of what Andy Wakefield showed in his landmark paper back in 2000, was what the MMR vaccine was doing was creating an inappropriate inflammation in the gut. And we extended those studies to show that some of what was creating that inflammation was that these vaccines contain mouse parts and mouse retroviruses and proteins and expression, and that was doing a severe dysregulation along with the aluminum and things like that, which we'll talk about at great length. So this is a very intricate communication system, and as I said, the brain can alter the gut. So your adrenal.
Yeah. I'm waiting for you to take a breath so I can ask you a question.
I can't see you yet, but
you won't see me. I'm not going to be on the screen. But okay. I wanted to ask you about going back to the leaky gut. I have someone in my family who has multiple myeloma. And prior to being diagnosed with multiple myeloma, he had Crohn's, or has inflammatory bowel disease for 30, 40 years. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question is, since Crohn's disease or inflammatory bowel disease, he would most likely has a leaky gut. Correct?
Oh, absolutely. And multiple myeloma is a disease where the B cells don't make the appropriate antibodies. So just like I was showing you in this slide, the IgA antibodies, well, we've got IgGs, we've got subclass deficiencies in a lot of these diseases. So when you stop making the appropriate repertoire of all immune cells, not just B cells and antibodies, then you start doing more and more and more damage. So yes, multiple myeloma is an inflammatory driven cancer, and a lot can have accelerated in progression to cancer, because cancer, cancer is an acquired immune deficiency. And so if the gut and you already have in your family acquired immune deficiency or inflammatory diseases like inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, everything, inflammatory pain syndromes. That's why the list I showed you of diseases that were associated with retroviruses that are going up and up in our world, these all can be considered to have a component of a disturbance of a gut microbiome. And in fact, every one of these diseases, myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, autism spectrum disorders, HIV, AIDS, HTLV1 associated cancers and myelopathies, all of the diseases that were on that chart, PTSD, Gulf War, that are in fact considered psychiatric or psychosomatic, are in fact acquired immune deficiencies. And this has been our central dogma hypothesis now for more than a decade that I've worked on these diseases. And we informed that from the 3 decades we worked on cancer and HIV/AIDS. So when we start seeing, that's how we're able to see what in the environment is causing the disease. So yes, your family history and your brother's history, unchecked gut disturbances and a microbiome that lacks the diversity. In fact, you could just put the same pattern of the gut on all of these diseases and say, how can you imagine, when I first went into this, that ME/CFS cancer, multiple myeloma, was one of them, as was CLL, prostate cancer, aggressive breast cancer, ovarian cancer. These are all diseases that have the exact same pattern of microbiome disturbance. So you can see that the immune system is failing to function normally, or it would clear the cancer, or it would make its entire repertoire of antibody. And not multiple myeloma means you make a single or just a couple of antibodies, so you can't make the repertoire. And so chronic lymphocytic leukemia, mantle cell lymphoma, everything we found in these families. And that's why as a practitioner, you should really focus on the entire family, on the environment. Look at the environment, and we'll go on to I'll go on to these other slides, because you're looking to the environment for those brain altering. I'll put this slide up. You're looking to the environment for the acquired immunological susceptibility to chronic inflammatory diseases. So I could have easily had only this slide in the entire 45 minutes, because you see each one of these things that imparts information to the brain actually changes your immune system and drives towards chronic disease. So the idea in prevention and good health is to control everything in your outside environment, particularly in the child, in the infant as it develops, because before a year old, it just should not be seeing anything other than, mother's milk, or if you can, colostrum and formulas we'll talk about later, because we appreciate that infants can't always get mother's milk. But at the same time, you can see on this slide everything that plays a role in gut health, in your brain health, in the development of cancers, in the development of all of these diseases. So it's that gut dysbiosis, and the word just means that it's out of balance. And so you acquire it throughout your life from those environmental risk factors. The C-section we discussed, broad spectrum antibiotics, both mom and children. So we're, and infants, we're giving, and the toxins from GMO foods and formulas. GMOs are vectors. GMOs are going to dysregulate. They look like pieces of foreign particles to your immune system. So you're going to lose that tolerance you were supposed to develop in the first year of life, lose the ability to know what is good and what is bad, what is self, what is non-self. And then you create this disease engine, as I've shown you in that first seminar we talked about, where you'll get this repeated cytokine storm that leads to more inflammation of the gut. It breaks down the brain microbiome and the blood-brain barrier, as do things like I mentioned, polysorbate 80 and aluminum. Those two single reagents and mercury, the heavy metals in those vaccines, are destroying not only your gut microbiome, but your blood-brain barrier, which is essentially the tight junctions in your brain that keep all the stuff out. Well, now we know we're deliberately breaking down these things in our children, and that's why I keep talking to everybody who will listen, such that no infant under a year old ever gets vaccinated again, and hopefully not any under 3 years old, because by that time they can develop an appropriate gut-brain access. They can have a strong cell wall, gut cell wall, blood-brain barrier, and the communication isn't broken from the very beginning. So I went back a slide just to show you the healthy status and all of the alterations in the gut. You have on the left-hand side a healthy immune system with the appropriate immune surveillance cells there. They look like little monocytes and little dendritic cells and little lymphocytes. Those aren't the angry lymphocytes or the angry, very unhappy, very activated immune system, which is that inflammation. It's a good inflammation because its job is just to parole the perimeters and make sure none of the bad guys get in. And so when you disturb that basic, very, very basic function of the good bacteria, it's very, very difficult, because once the bad guys get in, shown by yellow on the right side, then you've got this cytokine storm driving all of these cells in there that really shouldn't be in there, and you create autoimmunity because you start attacking the tissues. So you're getting attacked from the outside and attacked from the inside, and it all spins out of control. So just to show you that Nature Medicine and the journals now, the major scientific journals, are appreciating how the gut microbiome metabolism, just dietary fiber alone, enough dietary fiber can keep you from getting allergic airway disease, can keep you from getting asthma, and can control hematopoiesis, is the development of all your normal blood cells. And so it controls regular processes that are key to your health. That your fatty acids are extremely important. Getting natural fatty acids, short chain, medium chain, long chain. That's why we want to eat real butter, real fats, no GMOs, no polyunsaturated or normal fats, because those are driving inflammation. So it's all that we eat really is a key to our health, but all that we allow ourselves to be exposed to, or our patient population. Here's another paper that just shows the M2 macrophage is an angry macrophage. And so basically a good bacteria, a good fungi in the gut is producing, or a bad fungi in the gut is producing prostaglandin, and that prostaglandin is a pain molecule and an inflammatory molecule, and it's what the drug Celebrex, these COX-2 cyclooxygenase inhibitors, it's a pathway. It's what the drug Celebrex, when it was used in cancer therapies and originally developed as a cancer therapy, was just stopping this bad macrophage so that the good macrophage could go in. And in a lot of the inflammatory cancers, this was a very valuable therapeutic, but they're a natural therapeutic strategy. So I'm just showing you that in our world, in cancer and immune therapy and all that you'll see on the television today, you'll see all of these immune therapies, and all of them have to have the appropriate gut health and gut metabolites and probiotics that are good bacteria in order for the drug to even work. Otherwise, you're going to die, even with these things where they, these immune therapies, and that's where we've been studying for the past 3 decades, without the appropriate gut microbiome, the immune therapies won't work. The AIDS drugs won't cure AIDS. The cancer drugs won't cure cancer. And so we've learned that over the past decade, and this is an extremely exciting area of research that's called mucosal immunology, because all mucosal surfaces are different. Your gut is just one, but when we'll think again about the skin and the development of acquired immune deficiencies and cancers of the skin and lungs, and essentially every system in your body is regulated by what if the conversation of everything between your brain and your gut is healthy and functioning well. So so the last slide I show, and then we can talk about it a great deal, is so thinking about all of the things that we've learned in the past decade as far as the how to restore gut homeostasis. Homeostasis means balance. We want that healthy immune system all the way up and all the way down our guts. When you have GERD, reflux disease in your throat, that's the microbiome right there in your throat. There's a microbiome in your mouth. So when you have a lot of open sores like cold sores or viruses reactivated, what you want to do is reduce the inflammation in your mouth and restore your mouth to microbiome. And so one of all of these things on this page are key things, and we talked about bone broth and diet, and why bone broth is so healing for the gut. It's the appropriate ions and everything out of the bones, cooked B vitamins, metabolites from the good microbiomes of these healthy animals, and healthy bone, not GMO exposed. So I had mentioned in one talk, my friend Heather Dane, who I did a lecture with a few months ago, and we've talked about cooking classes and what to do. In the top, we talk about the medicinal power of cannabis, and cannabis is extremely important and extremely healing, because we've uncovered an endogenous cannabinoid system, and that was just discovered in the mid-90s. That means our brain has locks and keys. We actually make compounds that open doors and will tone down the inflammation. These go throughout our brains. They're very important, and throughout our guts and throughout neurons and peripheral tissues, all the way down to your feet, so that they're fatty acids. Cannabis is fat, so it's fat molecules lipid, we call it lipid signaling molecules, really, really, really important to in that balance, because when that endocannabinoid system is out of balance, you're in extreme pain. When that endocannabinoid system is out of balance, you can't absorb nutrients and you're AIDS patient thin, or you're extremely overweight. And it's not because necessarily you're eating too much, it's that you're not getting the appropriate metabolism. So we know these two books that I mentioned up here, one by John Hicks, MD, hundreds, if not thousands, of peer-reviewed publications in our lab, in scientific laboratories around the world, and then Cannabis Pharmacy, which goes to break down the plant for you and teach the plant, because of course we make all of our drugs from natural products in plants. That's why you introduced my background in natural products. A key that are not cannabinoid but talk to that endocannabinoid system are essential oils. So myrcene, limonene, and this pinene are really important antimicrobials, maintaining the right bacteria in your gut, in your brain. Again, so these essential oils will allow the endocannabinoids to appropriately signal, and it will allow whatever plant-based drugs to basically function. Without the other terpenoids, or the family members, the classes of these essential oils, these terpenoids are really critical to all of immune health, but particularly as they signal through the endocannabinoid system. I mentioned bone broth with Louise Hay. You can also buy a formulation from epigeneticlabs.com that's made, because not all of us have the time to make it, or cannot screen the bones, or know the right way to make the most nutrient of bone broth. So there are ways to get it. I learned this past weekend at an autism education conference in Dallas. I was there representing MAMA, which is Mothers Advocating Medical Marijuana for Autism. And of course, I mentioned that the autism gut microbiome looks like the MECFS microbiome, looks like an AIDS patient microbiome, looks like a cancer patient microbiome. So again, these spectrum disorders and these cluster of sequelae are acquired immune deficiencies, and you can fix it with, even if you've developed a great deal of allergies from milk because you've been inappropriately vaccinated, which everybody in our country is being inappropriately vaccinated. So Dr. Barry Smeltzer, I believe his name is, in Texas, talked about the camel's milk. So this is from their website, which is Deserts Farms. And camel's milk is unique because it contains a different kind of antibody. So for all these subclass deficiencies and normalizing that IgA in the gut and some of these things, camel's milk has a single chain antibody. So instead of something is toxic and made from human blood products like IVIG, we're beginning to see huge benefit with getting appropriate nutrition. Where you might have an allergy to cow's milk, it also has colostrum, which is really important for your microbiome, and these different forms of antibodies in the camel's milk. So that's an area where I'm going to work with Barry and then the group in Texas, because we think the product, the Bravo yogurt probiotic, which is quite a good product. Others know it as GC Math, and this also has like 21 different strains of good bacteria. So if you're allergic to cow's milk, then you can't make this yogurt in cow's milk, and cow's milk is in our country just getting dirtier and dirtier because of the vaccines we're giving our cows and the toxins in the environment. So some have seen a lot of success at that autism conference by using the Bravo yogurt starter and making it in a really high quality camel's milk, such as that you get from Desert Farms or any number of farms around the country. So they're all clean. And of course, a couple of weeks ago we talked about Restore, which Restore is a product that has similar mineral, nutrient, and things to bone broth and some of the things in camel's milk without that unusual antibody. So when we think about ways we can take back our own health, and I know you know and plan on doing webinars after this to talk about other aspects. This was just the introductory one, and how to cook and healthy cooking. And I encourage you to consider, all of these opportunities. And as you know, we at MAR Consulting don't advocate anything, but direct you to products that we don't sell anything, we don't make any money, we don't have conflict of interest, but anything that I've listed here, we vetted for being at least free of any toxins, free of heavy metals. You have to make extreme certain that any bone broth you use, any gelatin source, even in capsules, does not have glyphosate. And you had Stephanie Seneff talk at great length about glyphosate, but all of these toxins in our environment have to be kept out of our food in order to restore and the gut homeostasis and get our balance back. And all of these things work together, but of course you can't throw all of it at it at the same time. You have to start healing. We talked about in a previous lecture, you can't add probiotics if your gut is still inflamed and leaky, because good things in the wrong place is just making the imbalance worse. So a lot of us just throw enzymes and probiotics into our system without thinking, and we haven't fix the problem of what's tearing up our guts, and until we and inflaming our guts, and until we solve the problem by removing the toxins from our environment, of course we can't. You're only going to make it worse by adding things. Essential oils and the cannabis are two, and the bone broth are three things that can begin to heal those tight junctions in the gut.
So I have a lot of questions.
Okay, and that was my last slide.
Okay, good.
I'm getting better.
No, you're great. I'll put you back on when you're talking, so you can put your screen back to normal.
Okay.
So if someone does have a leaky gut, so you kind of touched on this at the very end, they shouldn't even be doing the probiotics. They should start off with the bone broth. Start off with those essential oils that you described. Now, can someone do all three essential oils, or is that something where they start with one, then build to another? What is your opinion on that?
Well, it depends on what the issue is. So if you look up, there are a lot of good books with essential oils, and you want to work with a professional. But for instance, myrcene is an essential oil, and limonene, the essential oils, and they both, so one is especially good if you have yeast overgrowth. One is especially good if you have a Th2 imbalance where you have worms and as part of a parasite protocol. And I'd recommend that you do it in conjunction with a healthcare professional, because for instance, like with Dr. Barry Smeltzer that I met this weekend, it's really important to that camel's milk might be the first thing, or bone broth might be the first thing. So it depends on what the clinical symptoms are. If it's extreme pain, you're going to need some cannabinoids. If it's extreme, because cannabinoids control the kind of pain called nociception. And I don't remember if I gave you a cannabinoid talk or not, but we could break down each one of these areas. That's why this initial talk was intended to be an overview for the folks to see what kinds of things, what does science learn? Because I'm the scientist first, but also, we know what works and we know what doesn't work. We know how to support with good supplements and good natural products like some of those I'm I've shown on that last slide, we know how to support therapy. We don't and get you through cancer, because the therapies are toxic in and of themselves. Like antiretroviral therapy will destroy your gut microbiome. And so what you do with that is do it in conjunction with things like ketotifen or Restore or other things. Same thing's true for chemotherapies and things like that. So we've come a long way in the therapies that can help our patients survive the chemotherapies. And it's important, because without the chemotherapies, you really can't get well. So if you have something like a virus, like these retroviruses, these vaccines, and you continue to do damage, then you have to just continue to fix the gut, and then the various detox systems. So we have to shut down the damage first. But at the same time, you're just wasting money on probiotics that won't work.
Right. So this person I was telling you about before that, well, first of all, I want to ask you, is Restore a good first choice as well?
I don't have direct use of Restore in patient populations, but the patients tell me it is. And so looking at the mineral components in Restore, which I did briefly in preparing for this talk, and I got it from the site of ProHealth. So I reviewed all of their literature and can say, yes, Restore could be a good place to start.
Okay. I'm also just putting in here about Moms Across America. They sell Restore, and I'm mentioning them because they do a lot of great work. They're a nonprofit, and I'm hoping that people will look to purchase Restore from them. So the other question I have for you is, going back to that person I was telling you that has multiple myeloma. He happens to be my stepfather. Right. And so he's had Crohn's disease for 30, 40 years, which is treated with a steroid, right? They use steroids to decrease the inflammation, and he takes like a whole box full of supplements. Right. So he's probably doing more harm than good.
Oh, absolutely. Correct? Especially if those supplements have excipients in the tablet, or glyphosate in the gelatin capsules, if they're GMO, if they're, unless you control the supplements. And that's one of the first things I do with a lot of the patients as we work with them, is I say, okay, everything you're taking, because everything you're putting in, even good things, can be bad at the wrong time. And so then we'll encourage you we'll get immune modulatory supplements to support that. Happy to help your father-in-law work through these things if he's open, because there are some simple things to do. And it's not that the supplement's not necessarily good. It's just, it's not good for you at this time. Right. And so we really work, because then somebody will say, well, I tried Restore and it didn't do anything at all. Well, you might have had other issues and other pathways, such as methylation machinery, that we have to fix first in order to stop that dysbiosis. So when they use the Bravo probiotic or the Rerum, that's the new form of GC-MAF, that's friendlier to your immune system, that particular protocol, first they fix your gut with a diet that is high in good proteins and good fats, and begin to seal it up and remove any antibiotics and remove any from your food, because the antibiotics in your food is just as bad.
Okay, so Eric asks, what about a prebiotic? How important is taking one?
Well, a prebiotic is it's just another form of bacteria that's going to help you enzymatically prepare things. For me, I think of prebiotics as fermented food. So rather than take a prebiotic, I would prefer a kombucha or fermented foods, kombucha, kimchi, things like that. I don't prefer a pill form, especially in, when it's all about food and it's all about natural ingredients. That's why I work very hard to make sure that your diets contain those things, because I can't control the pills as well as, you know, you don't know where it's going all the way up and all the way down, where it's going to be absorbed, if it's going to be absorbed. We have some of the finest supplements in the world, and the guts are so disturbed that it comes out as a whole pill, even though we can do it in a laboratory in the appropriate, you know, we have different pH, different acidic levels at different parts. Your throat is less acidic than the middle of your intestine, the small intestine, things like that. And you know, so there are micro environments. And so when you're taking a pill, you just don't know you got to the right microenvironment and the bad thing in the wrong place. That was the key to that second slide, and you can make all the slides available. We didn't learn until just now that what happens as we age is the microbiome up here. It's like everything else that falls down, pardon the pun joke, things fall down. And when they end up in the wrong place in your gut, they're in the wrong place. So every part of those feet of small and large intestine have a different good microbiome. So I don't recommend prebiotics either. If you can, I'd really prefer the natural food type way. You know, I wouldn't say use Celebrex because there are other off-target effects with regard to, you know, cardiac and things like that. So you really have to normalize everything. And I only touched on the adrenals and the HPA axis, but the adrenals, pantothenic acid and vitamin B5, those complex B vitamins, which you get out of the bone broth, are really important because it's the combination. And if you have too much of one and not enough of another, you'll have problem. And the adrenal fatigue is what it will destroy all of your microbiomes, not just your gut microbiome.
Yeah, and I think that anyone who's watching who goes to any kind of natural doctor, right, you know, I think it's important to realize that this is complicated. There's no cookbook approach, that you can't just take, you can take 5 people with the same health problem and there might be 5 different ways of going through to resolve it. And I think it's important for people to understand that.
And that's why it's important that these talks, that my talks are intended, my talks are intended to be in a, in healthcare professional settings, and that's why they're complicated. But your patients and the clients are very sophisticated, and they know their own family. So I always hope that if I say the right thing, then they'll think back to something they hadn't even considered as an environmental toxin or something that could be tearing up the gut oh, I've taken this pill all the time, you know, and then all of a sudden you don't realize how much aluminum, I'm going to have to just ignore that with a message. You don't realize how much aluminum, for instance, let's just take an orange juice carton. So you say, oh, good, I'm going to get the orange juice with the buy-on date, you know, months down the road or years down the road. And what that cardboard is lined with is aluminum. So the vitamin C in your orange juice is literally taking the aluminum off the inside of the package. So if that's been sitting in that container for even as much as a few days, you're ingesting a ton of aluminum. And that's going to be immune suppressive, methylation suppressive. That's what the big toxin is. It's going to suppress your dendritic cells, your innate cells, everything about it, and you're ingesting it. You do not want to take a Tums. You know, you do not want to put a Band-Aid on it. You don't want to take steroids. That's how we kept AIDS patients alive, because it's by silencing the viruses, but also by suppressing the immune system. But that's a general suppression, so you'll get all of these other things because you haven't fixed the problem. And so that we prefer that we target the immune response, and you can do that through these natural products and food. Let me just
yeah, so I
almost finishing up, so if you come down, I'll be ready. Polymer Porto. All right, bye.
So we have a couple more questions.
No, it's okay.
Heather would like to know, what do you think of FMT, and in what circumstances would you recommend it?
That means fecal microbiome transplant. We use that in severe cases of AIDS and cancer. And there's actually a company called Open Biome, which makes, which makes a clean product that's FDA approved for Clostridium. So Clostridium is an extremely dangerous pathogen that gets in and replaces that good bacteria. So it's approved only for that, but sometimes we can get compassionate use. So I would use it in severe cases of immune deficiency, literally wasting diseases or motor neuron diseases. When time is of the essence to fix the problem, then I would use it in those cases.
And we have Liz asking, and this is something you and I have talked about a lot, how can she find a doctor to work with to heal her gut with the newest techniques and supplements? Is there a list of good doctors? She's seen so many doctors that are clueless and out of date.
Yeah, I work with a lot of them. So yeah, I mean, but this is all new science. So the best way to find doctors who are upfront is ask them directly. What are your strategies for microbiome, healthy microbiome management? What is your parasite protocol or your gut protocol? If you're going to use a type of drug, what are you going to do to support a healthy gut? So if you ask the questions and the doctor doesn't mind, it isn't offended by the conversation, you get to interview your doctors. I will put together a list of doctors that I know, because as I've gone to things like Ben Lynch and SHICON. So SHICON is Seeking Health Education Institute or Initiative, and it's a foundation, and they have a conference every year, the Conference for SHEI, SHEI, Dr. Ben Lynch. And so I have a list across the country of doctors who are using the various protocols, and we learn from each other. So you want doctors who have CME credits, continuing medical education. You want your doctors going to conferences like Autism One, like the Thrive conferences, like this conference I was at this weekend. I'm going to the Truth About Cancer on the 15th. That's the 14th, 15th, and 16th in Dallas. So these are physicians who are forward thinking and treating that way. So you want your doctors attending those conferences. You want your doctors taking these courses, and certainly Mark Consulting will vet doctors for you, and will work with doctors and give you names. And that's what we often do, is just say, okay, here's where we would go. Almost the first question I ask when somebody writes me from one of your webinars is, where are you? Because when I know where they are, I know what their marijuana laws are, I know who the doctors are in the area, and I know who's working in a complete situation. We're looking at a systems biology approach. Everything has to be considered.
Right. So can they get that list? Do you have that list on your website, or people just have to contact you?
I need to build it. So our website, we're gonna, we haven't done much with it lately because we reorganized the company, as you know, recently. And so we're gonna build those lists of things. And so we ask doctors, is it okay if we recommend you? Can we say Mark Consulting works with Dr. Tarlow? Mark Consulting works with Ben Lynch and SHICON. Mark Consulting recommends, because then it saves the question. But usually, if you ask, the first thing, just if we're going to have a consult, just tell me who you're seeing, because we're not practicing physicians. We work with the doctors. We have lectures with various doctors around the country, and at Autism One, where we teach them. We have panels. We teach them things. We give them the literature. I'll give you the references. So when your doctor is educated, then that's a doctor you want.
Yeah. So Heather wants to know if you have a Facebook page, and
Nope.
No, you don't have a Facebook page. You have somebody who has a support for Dr. Judy Mikovits page.
There is a support page for me out there, a Facebook page. Some of you might recall some of the illegal action taken against me was I could not participate for 5 years in Facebook or blogs or any such social media because that was one way to silence me.
Yeah. Okay. We have run out of time. Thank you so much again. I really appreciate it. And I think people get a lot out of this.
Yeah, I hope so. And I appreciate the questions and anything you can do, I can do to do it better. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.